As darkness fell over the Forbidden City, candlelight shimmered across the frigid vermilion walls, highlighting the shaking silhouette of a woman cocooned in a blanket, quietly making her way to the Emperor's chamber. Outside, the eunuch's steps resonated, like the relentless tick of destiny. Nobody could risk a deep breath. No one was permitted to love, and none could make a choice. Within the Qing dynasty's imperial harem, every single night resembled a mortal chess match, each imperial visit a wager on a different fate, and every concubine just another etched name amid 3,000 rivals. Power, flesh, and longing were split between triumph and disgrace. Behind the thin drape of silk, what truly unfolded as imperial favor turned into an instrument of control and warmth became an unattainable prize. Who actually prevailed in that silent contest? Under the Qing, the imperial harem abided by intensely rigid protocols, spanning rank hierarchies to the most minute facets of routine, especially the ritualized imperial visit, a process appearing private but in reality a public spectacle. Every concubine's name was inscribed onto a petite wooden piece known as a name tag. Each evening, after the final meal, the emperor picked one at random. The chosen concubine would then be summoned to the emperor's quarters to attend to him. To outsiders, this may sound lucky, but it was really only the opening act of a suffocating ordeal, where the woman had neither a right to her feelings nor a right to refuse. Upon notification of a visitation, the concubine had to wash herself meticulously, douse herself with scent, and groom her hair perfectly. Yet after washing, she could not put on garments. Instead, she had to swathe herself completely in a blanket, lying still in wait. Once the eunuchs arrived, they would bear her, still shrouded in that blanket, to the emperor's chambers. During the entire ordeal, the woman was forbidden to walk upright, instead required to crawl onto the bed from the foot end, displaying humility and absolute surrender. Even amid intimacy, making any sound was strictly prohibited. Jewelry and personal effects were banned, partly for safety against possible assassination, and partly to enforce total control within the bedroom. At that time, only the emperor, the concubine, and a dozen eunuchs kept silent watch. The time allotted for a visit was also capped. When the appointed hour arrived, the eunuchs waiting outside would call loudly, reminding the emperor it was time to finish. If ignored, they would raise their voices, continuing until they received an answer. Afterward, the concubine would wrap herself up, crawl down off the bed as before, and be escorted back to her own quarters. But this was not the most horrifying aspect. Were you aware that retaining the imperial seed, the emperor's semen, was not always allowed? After each act, the eunuch would pose a particular question to the emperor. Should it remain? This question meant, does the emperor wish the concubine to bear a child or not? If the reply was negative, the eunuch would initiate unsettling steps. He would press hard on a specific pressure point on the woman's belly, then persistently massage to expel all of the semen. All this was to ensure no unplanned child was conceived. It might sound clinical, but this was an era when some eunuchs took advantage of their power to mistreat the concubines. They were touched, used, but dared not object. For a single word of complaint could mean losing imperial favor forever. For these women, being picked for a visit was the only slim chance to climb the social ladder. Lose that, and their palace lives became cold and lonely till the end. There were some sharp concubines, too, who took advantage of such times to negotiate with the eunuchs in exchange for another encounter or a message to the emperor. Within the harem, cunning was essential for survival. If they couldn't rely on looks, they had to depend on cleverness. That's also why, for many women then, being chosen for an imperial visit meant not honor, but degradation. A moment of being processed, delivered, dismissed as if they were objects. Even sharing the night with the emperor was a privilege kept for the empress alone. All others, regardless of favor, were mere temporary presences in his bedroom. Moreover, if a concubine erred, uttering a sound during the visit or sneaking in jewelry, the punishments were severe: confinement, whipping, demotion to servant, or exile to the cold palace to fade into obscurity. So, love in the palace, if it could be called love, was a fleeting illusion. Concubines had no right to affection. They were only allowed to wait, hope, and perhaps be chosen. Hope for a night of favor that could shift their destiny. But the cost was humiliation, pain, and the ever-present risk of abuse. All of this began with a simple piece of wood, the name tag that bore the fate of each woman in the palace. If you believe every concubine desired imperial visits, reconsider. Sometimes being selected was akin to a death sentence, especially during menstruation. For modern women, menstruation is just routine, but in ancient China, it was seen as impure, even ominous. For the emperor, the son of heaven, encountering blood in the bedroom was strictly forbidden. Thus, if a concubine was summoned during her inconvenient time, the fallout could be severe. At best, she'd lose favor. At worst, she might be executed for showing disrespect. Therefore, in a world where women's bodies and fates were micromanaged, they invented endless tactics to avoid imperial visits during those times. One notorious method was called stealing the dragon, swapping the phoenix, having someone else fill her place. This was risky, yet possible, as there were hundreds or thousands in the harem, many brought in young with similar faces, rarely seen by the emperor, making recognition difficult. If a concubine was not often summoned, the emperor might not notice. So, sometimes a palace maid with a close resemblance was sent in her stead. But this ruse required the complicity or bribery of the eunuchs overseeing the name tags. If caught, both the impersonator and the real concubine faced death for deceiving the emperor. This is why, despite the existence of such tricks, few dared attempt them, and even fewer succeeded. It was a gamble with life at stake. A subtler way was to signal discreetly to the emperor. In the Han Dynasty, concubines on their period would wear a gold ring called jinji, a pun for jingji, subtly saying the emperor understood he'd skipped that name tag. By the Tang era, the signal became a small red dot painted on the face, a silent cue for female attendants that she was unavailable, and arrangements could quietly be changed. After the Tang, in the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period, each region had its own secret sign. Some used red string on the wrist, others hung a red lantern outside the door. Just the sight of red meant, not available. Excuse me tonight. In the Qing, the most rigorous of all, a special office, the Jingyu Fang, was established to oversee the imperial visit name tags. It organized, selected, and presented tags every evening. Concubines menstruating informed the Jingyu Fang eunuchs, who then removed the name from the pool, avoiding awkwardness. This allowed both sides to save face and kept the harem running smoothly without scandal. Still, despite all precautions, refusing the emperor was almost impossible. The Son of Heaven ruled a nation, and defying his wish was unthinkable. To do so would disgrace his honor and could result in permanent disfavor. So these subtle, ingenious strategies became vital arts of survival for palace women. Those adept in their use preserved their bodies. The clumsy lost not only opportunity, but sometimes even their lives. Notably, these strict protocols held only in the Forbidden City. When the emperor left for the summer palace or the mountains, the rules could be relaxed or dropped. Then intimacy became less scripted and more natural. No tags, no rituals, just whim. In those rare moments, concubines tasted a fleeting freedom from their otherwise suffocating routine. Yet such occasions were rare, mere weeks each year. The imperial harem, far from the dreamy images in old paintings, was a realm where people became chessmen. Every action, every word was measured. Beauty became a weapon, wits became armor, and often it was silent shrewdness that kept them alive. Living in the imperial harem meant not living, but merely surviving. To exist, every concubine learned to strategize, accept shame, and hold out for another uncertain chance at favor. If the harem's protocols seem suffocating to us now, there is a colder truth underneath. For concubines, being favored was more than a knight. It was a life and death bet, their destinies riding on each drop of imperial seed, every glance, each impulsive whim of a man who owned the world. After a visit, if the emperor wished to allow conception, the woman was meticulously recorded: date, time, name, responsible official, and imperial confirmation. Each record wasn't just a tally of encounters, but a promise of a future, power, and a potential rise in status. If a child was born a prince, officially recognized as heir, the mother's rank changed overnight, from concubine to noble lady, consort, or even imperial noble consort. But if there was no record, no child, no keeping, then all hopes vanished like mist. Thus, after each time the emperor chose not to retain the seed, the eunuchs forcibly expelled it with abdominal massage. This may sound harsh, but it was a necessary measure to protect the bloodline. an indirect tool for the court to manage reproduction and palace politics. Worse, some eunuchs use this practice to abuse their power, prolonging the process or getting inappropriately close as an assertion of authority. Most concubines dared not resist, knowing trouble could mean exile to the cold palace, or worse. In that intricate web, each concubine became a chess piece, forced to move cleverly, quietly, or painfully. The longer she stayed, the more she realized only those who conceived wielded influence. The rest were voiceless. For that reason, some went to any length to keep the imperial seed, even flouting the emperor's instructions. A few, after being forced to expel the seed, tried to preserve a little, keep the eunuch at bay, swap towels or bedding, or hide the timing in hope of conceiving. Yet these schemes, if exposed, were as dangerous as treason, punishable by torture or death. Some resisted, others endured, and some negotiated with the eunuchs. It may sound strange, but in the harem there existed a hidden alliance. Some eunuchs and concubines became secret partners, recording conceptions or creating opportunities for future visits in exchange for gifts, promises, or sometimes tolerating inappropriate touching. A concubine seeking repeated favor needed to know how to play the game. The more gay. The more visits, the greater her chance of bearing a child. And with it, everything changed. Many chose silence in the face of abuse, even offering themselves to secure opportunity. In the hush of the bedchamber behind silk veils, these women not only struggled for survival, but wrestled their own humiliation. Each night was not merely about bodies, but a crucial move in a dangerous game where affection was rare and genuine emotion forbidden. Should pregnancy occur at the wrong moment, without permission to keep it, only two paths remained. Either end the pregnancy or give birth in secret, facing consequences later. No matter which, the stakes were immense. The harem allowed no errors. You were either officially recognized or erased forever. For this reason, every legitimate pregnancy was painstakingly documented: name, date, time, and health. This proved the bloodline and helped resolve future succession disputes. Imagine a child, unborn, already under such scrutiny, with its mother afraid to breathe, never leaving the palace, every move suspicious. Even a yawn might be read as insolence. Should the emperor visit during menstruation and see blood, all would collapse. The woman lost favor, or worse, was accused of failing in her duty to her body, an insult to the emperor. Thus, all those secret codes, gold rings, red strings, face marks, were survival tactics learned only by the wise. To conclude, the Qing harem was a vast, cold mechanism where every part turned according to merciless rules. Here, women had no right over their own bodies, could not love, could not refuse, and sometimes were not even permitted to live if they slipped. Was being summoned to a visit fortune or curse, honor or shackle? Only the women hidden in the city's shadow could truly know. And for us in the modern age, we can only listen, as if to the faint whispers from a lost world, where human lives were buried under layers of red and gold. Thank you for staying to the end. If you found depth or emotion in this story, feel free to comment or share your reflections. See you in future videos as we continue to explore lost chapters of history.